What's going on, guys? My name is Steve. Thank you for stopping by my channel. Today we're going to be reacting to our kilts from Scotland or Ireland. I came across this video and I thought it was really interesting that this was actually a question. You know, while I don't really know much about the kilt, I don't know the history behind the kilt, I don't know where it came from or why it is actually worn. Is it a religious thing, or is it just symbolic of something else? Or is it just a really comfortable piece of clothing? I'm not really sure, but the one thing that I always thought was accurate was the fact that kilts were Scottish. You know, when I think about the kilt, I always think about them being worn by Scottish men. You know, I've never even thought about the kilt possibly being something that is also worn in Ireland. But maybe that is actually not the case. Maybe they are worn in Ireland as well. I'm not really sure. So don't know what to expect here, guys. So let's just go ahead and dive in and learn our kilts from Scotland or Ireland.
Ben Gibson asks the classic question, do kilts come from Ireland or Scotland, and why were they worn?
Do you want to go into the Lenya and all that and the back and forth on who's first and who's not?
Just start with kilts first, and then, you know, let's define a kilt and start there, and I'll pop in with the Irish stuff real quick.
Why, you know, where did they come from? If you, we're all saying it kind of started as what we know as a kilt, would be like a great kilt, where it's literally just a length of cloth laid on the floor that you hand pleat, you lay down on, you belt up, and you roll around and tuck it in, and off you go. It was basically an all-purpose utility thing. It was a sleeping bag, it was a blanket, it was pockets, it was a hood, it was, you know, whatever you needed it to be. When you're out in the, you know, tending to the sheep and you're miles from home, or if you're out herding cattle or whatever, you can't necessarily get home right away, or you may have to sleep in the fields. So that's what you had with you.
That makes so much sense.
It was a very utilitarian garment. So if you're starting it there, that's why the kilt came to be, because they needed something, and they didn't want to just carry a blanket and all these things. They could just wear their blanket, wear their house, wear their jacket.
That makes a lot of sense.
Basically, yeah. And I think the great kilt is primarily considered to be a Scottish invention. The roots of it seem to be, as best as we can tell, a common Gaelic kind of a look, which both the Highlands in Scotland in the Middle Ages and Ireland possessed, which was three basic garments. The lenya, or some people say lane, but I think it's lenya or lenya. Trews, which are the close-fitting trouser, kind of like tight like pants, and then the brot, which is a kind of a cloak. So we know that in the 16th century there's evidence of one of the early, in fact the probably earliest mention of Scottish clothing, which probably intimated a great kilt, was of Scottish mercenaries going to fight in Ireland. And the written account talks about how they're dressed in something similar to what the Irish wear, but not quite, and they have these large cloaks that they belt around their bodies, which is unusual, and that's probably the first mention of a great kilt, and that's from, I think, like 1520s. But the lenya was basically a long tunic. That is the Irish contribution to world clothing. It was basically a long tunic. It varied in length and style over the centuries, but it was most famous as being the very long saffron-colored tunic, which went down to the knees, sometimes below the knees. Towards the later period, it had a lot more voluminous fabric in it, to the point that they were actually pleating it up in the back. And it had these very, very long sleeves, kind of like if you think of like a girl's princess costume dress with a really long, pointy kind of sleeves. That's actually, historically, goes back to a number of different fashions, but the lenya had it. It's these long sleeves, more fabric showing off more style and more wealth, probably. It seems that Highland Scots may have been wearing a very similar outfit to that up through like the 15th century or so. And then, for whatever reason, the Scots decided to do something a little bit different. Both these cultures seem to like to go bare-legged, which I think is probably due to environmental conditions like mud and thistles and things, where it's just easier to have your legs open so you could keep your legs clean and not having fabric clinging to them. I don't know.
If it was thistles, I would think that you'd want to wear pants. You're not getting scratched up.
Yeah, true.
But if you're fording rivers and streams on a regular basis,
that's
maybe
true.
You wouldn't.
Or if you're sweating a lot, maybe you wouldn't.
I don't know how much you sweat in the Highlands. It's pretty cool.
It's
You know,
But you're moving a lot.
Yeah, I'm thinking more like water and things like that.
I think it's water related.
It'll dry off
Yeah,
quicker.
I think.
Versus
Yeah,
if
if
you're
you think about brogues and bog shoes with all the holes and everything, so
Yeah.
water can drain out. I really think it's the water aspect.
it's more comfortable too.
Now, my personal opinion is that the brot, the mantle that both areas wore, but the Irish were more famous for, maybe that's what evolved into the great kilt. Like a brot's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and eventually some guy's like, heck with it, I'm going to belt this thing and I'm going to wrap it around myself a little differently. That's my personal opinion. It's a slightly murky topic, but the earliest evidence we have for the kilt, the great kilt, is that Scottish 16th century. Matt Newsom, as usual, has a really good article on this stuff on his website called Almanac. And that's one place where I got my information from, and I highly recommend you read it.
Cool.
All right. Hopefully that answers the question. And then there's evolution of the kilt beyond that time period in Scotland. That's pretty much entirely Scottish.
Yeah, and then it's once it gets cut into the half kilt or filabeg, which is effectively the tailored garment that we're wearing today. That is an entire own evolution.
Right.
And then touching quickly on that came before, that as a garment came before the Irish half kilt, which was pretty much the St. Edna's school. Enda's school in the turn of the century with the Gaelic revival and the Irish trying to be separate from the English.
They took a Scottish kilt and made it Irish to basically flip off the English.
Yep.
Essentially.
Wow.
And that's why the Irish kilts, traditional Irish kilts, traditional meaning early 1900s, were solid color, and you still see saffron color and blue and green solid color kilts for the Irish.
Yep.
The Irish tartans were invented in the mid 1990s.
Wow. Okay. This was a lot of information in a short video. So first, I'd like to say that I never knew there were any other type of kilt than kind of what they're wearing here, just the bottom half, which is, I think they called the half kilt, which makes sense. And two, I guess Irish men do wear kilts. I've never seen that personally, except maybe I did. Now that I think about it, there was a video where I don't remember what it was, but there was a bunch of different military regiments marching, and I think someone in the comments pointed out one of the regiments was the Irish, and I think they were wearing kilts, but something about that, I can't remember. But other than that, I've never even thought about Irish men wearing kilts. It's always been in my head. It's always been a Scottish thing, and it seems like they've both had a part in kind of the modern kilt, from what I understand here. I'm not 100% certain, but it does sound like the kilt was the great kilt. Isn't that what they call it? The great kilt, which is basically like a large blanket that goes all around you. That makes total sense. It makes sense. You're up in the highlands. It's going to be cool a lot of times. You're going to be out tending sheep or whatever, and you could be very far from home, and it makes total sense to have this warm garment that you're just wearing on you, so you don't have to carry it around. You're actually wearing it, but it has pockets, and it can be used as a hood. It can be used in a blanket, a sleeping bag, like they said. That's just an all around great idea for a piece of clothing. So it doesn't sound like it started out as any sort of type of religious thing or symbolic thing. It sounded like it started as something that just made a lot of sense for the way they were living. And since then, I don't really know the meaning why the half kilt came around. Maybe, like they were saying, maybe it has something to do with the fact of water or something like that. So instead of wearing pants, the kilt would your legs would get wet, being out in marshy areas or whatever. I don't know. That's interesting though. And it does sound like the modern kilt, there has been some influence from Ireland on it. Guys, anybody with more information about the kilt, especially as we look into the more modern look of it, because I never even knew there was anything other than what I'm seeing here, the half kilt. So if you have some other information, I'd like to know exactly what's obviously Scottish influence is the actual kilt itself. The great kilt supposedly is from Scotland, and then Irish fashion of some sort has at least has influenced Irish kilts. I'm not even sure if they've influenced Scottish kilts. I'm not really sure. He didn't go into too much detail about that. But I'd like to learn a little bit more about this. I think this is interesting. I really don't. This right here is all I know about kilts. So if you have some good information you'd like to share with me in the comments, whether it's just a comment or a video about kilts, both in Scotland and Ireland, please let me know. It sounds like you said here, Irish kilts. Again, I don't really know exactly the difference between an Irish kilt and a Scottish kilt. I'd like to know that. But it sounds like they took the Scottish kilt of the time and they wanted to upset the English. So I don't really quite understand it. But that makes a lot of sense on the surface, at least. But guys, this was interesting. Thank you so much for stopping by. Please click that like button. Feel free to drop your comments or suggestions about this video or others. And don't forget to subscribe to continue to follow me on my journey to discover my British and Irish ancestry. Until next time, guys, peace.